Welcome to the Simple Minds podcast, where we look to empower and encourage real conversation amongst men everywhere by unpacking topics on self-growth, philosophy, and business. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Simple Minds podcast. I'm Jacob and I'll be our host today, and today I'm open to new experiences. I have...
Wrong podcast.
What?
Swingers, welcome.
Where's your keys in the bowl there?
I have brought a drink that I would not normally drink, and I brought a topic involving something that I'm very open to discussing with the team, but I'll come to that in a second. The drink I brought today is a cold brew coffee. Now, we catch up for breakfast every week as a group, and everyone will know that I don't drink coffee. Never
Or
have,
Travis.
Probably never
You don't?
will. Have no interest in it. I don't mind the taste, but I don't like the effect.
It's funny how the two athletes in the room don't drink coffee.
Yeah, that's true.
Just like to point out that fact.
Don't compare
Seriously,
yourself,
mate.
please.
But I brought in a cold brew coffee
Athletic. Smells
from
like coffee.
Dimatina. It's a local
How come you've got one?
Osborne
I've got
Park-based
hands.
coffee shop, and I've actually got some tasting notes as well. I spoke to the owners
Of course you
the
do.
place. It's a single origin from Santa Clara in Brazil.
Oh,
I'm going to let everyone have a little bit of
Is
sip
that verified?
first.
Brazilian.
Have a sip first, and then I'll share the tasting notes.
Never trust anything without an address on it.
I don't mind it.
It's nice.
It's almost like a deconstructed, whatchamacallit,
Coffee?
iced coffee. Like, I reckon it would be good with milk, this one.
Yeah, that one is good. Not normally a fan of it.
So what are
Nice
we,
and, it's nice and strong as well. It's good.
what are we
It's gonna be
tasting, guys? What are we feeling?
Mushrooms.
Coffee. Bit of chocolate,
anyone
maybe. Bit of dark
identify-
chocolate.
Yeah, a bit of
Blackberry jam.
cow.
No, chocolate.
Oh, Justin's onto it. Cacao nibs.
Hey,
Oh,
hey.
there we go.
Hey,
okay.
seasoned palate. And
That's
Conrad, are you
chocolate.
picking
I
up
can
any?
definitely taste the cow.
You
in
picking
there.
up any Shiraz?
Cacao.
No, I'm picking up the bitterness of the cacao.
Yeah.
Now,
As
now,
opposed to-
brown cacao.
As opposed to the cacao.
Oh, God. That,
That's good. It's a little bit sweet.
Yeah.
It is sweeter
Yeah,
than
it's
I
good.
expected.
Yeah.
The way
Has
they
it got sugar in
the way they cold brew coffee, because it's not heated up, it releases a lot of the more like the natural sugars and the sweetness of the coffee bean, rather than that kind of bitterness people are used to from kind of the hot brewed, I guess, coffee. So
Where does the Shiraz come into it?
I don't know, mate. I'm gonna-
Someone sort of
Or is
dropped,
it just a
dropped
flavour
the bottle
profile?
in.
I was going to say,
So this
they're
batch
using
has got-
different vats.
That's from an altitude of 1100. I guess that's meters. There's the tasting notes. So the topic I brought today is a big one: spirituality. The reason I brought it to the table is we were discussing it last week at breakfast, and I've been sitting with it for months, years even, and kind of finally come to the conclusion that, at least presently, I'm not spiritual. In my notes to the group, I said, I don't believe that we physically as human beings are anything more than a collection of atoms. I don't believe we have a soul or a consciousness that lives on after we die. I don't believe there is a God in a religious capacity or otherwise. I don't believe as human beings we are connected by anything more than our experiences or our memories. And I don't believe we are in any shape or form a reincarnation of a former self or a former consciousness. Very, very open to discussing these. and
Do you
getting
believe
your
if we're in
thoughts
a
on them, guys.
simulation?
Say again?
Do you believe if we're in a simulation?
of course.
Oh, that sounds like a good topic, actually.
Just to clarify what you've brought up spirituality and you've brought up religion, but they're very different things, right?
Yeah, and that's where I don't want to take this down the line of religion. I kind of almost want to separate that out and kind of maybe perhaps Conrad or Matt can share a distinction before we begin, because I'm not necessarily strictly clear on that. I was baptized Catholic and went to a Catholic school and was brought up a Christian, and have since I guess, withdrawn from that. But in its absence, I haven't found anything that can take its place that resonates with me yet.
That's interesting because I actually think it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Science, religion, philosophy, spirituality. It's just the process of not understanding something or not knowing and searching for meaning is kind of connected to all of that. Science is the same. They're searching for meaning, searching for whatever it is. Spirituality is the same thing. Religion is the same thing. It's a framework, I think, anyway. There's very similar
Yeah.
sort of modes, I think, but
And
just different words for it.
And the scientific way of dealing with the world and trying to understand it is the one that resonates with me currently.
Yep.
How would you find yourself, or how would you define yourself with respect to your stance on Stoicism?
Just in general, or
Yeah. Yep.
big fan.
Hoorah!
So can I give you the origin of Stoicism?
Yeah, 100%.
So the religious impulse of Stoicism is directed towards personal piety rather than public worship. Prayer and worship were certainly included in the Stoic practice, and they had a single aim to bring the thoughts and actions of the individual practitioner into coherence with universal reason, the Logos, which pervades the cosmos. As the French philosopher Pierre Hadot argues, what defined a Stoic above all else was the choice of life in which every thought, every desire, and every action would be guided by no other law other than that of the universal reason.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. I've really trying to come to this discussion open-minded, knowing that to just completely write off and say I'm not spiritual is kind of my beginning stance, I guess. But I'm very much open to the idea that there are aspects and elements of it that I will resonate with. And I don't think it's a yes or no binary sort of thing. I imagine there's a scale and there's aspects that potentially work for me. So I guess first want to discover or ask you guys where each individual sits.
Can we first go to, I guess, a couple of meanings of
course, yeah.
spirituality? So there's a few different thought trains on the meaning of spirituality. I'll do two and then a technical meaning. One is the energy that refers to a widespread belief in an interpersonal, non-physical force for essence. Another one is relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. And the actual word of spiritual is a Latin root word, and its meaning is breath. And this informs that spirituality was the essence of life. So when you said about spirituality, and what I directly associate it with was energy. I'm a very big energy person and a very big breath person, and how energy flows through my body and how I pass on energy to other people, and that's how I define spirituality. I'm not so whatsoever religious in any way or stoic, I would say, but I'm a big energy person, and how I relate to a different person. That's how I kind of bring spirituality into my life.
That's interesting you say you're not stoic though. In your competitiveness that I've observed, you demonstrate a lot of stoic characteristics.
I guess it's something I've never pursued in readings, or I'm trying to understand it yet. Something I would like to, but I haven't.
But if you don't pursue it, but demonstrate characteristics of it, does that mean that you're not it?
No, I agree with you. It's probably something I've never thought about. But does anyone else think along the lines of the energy piece or the breath? Because that's where
Oh, for sure.
I went straight
Yes.
down to the thought of it.
Well, I mean, I've also looked at the origin of the word spirituality, which I've taken from the context of Christian theology, and the Latin noun spiritual. I can't speak.
Spirituality.
No, spiritualitas. No, nothing else. Just spiritualitas.
I'm not saying anything.
Which is derived from the Greek noun pneuma, meaning spirit. Interestingly, spirit in its original context was not the opposite of the physical or material, but of flesh or everything that is not God. Therefore, a spiritual person, in its original Christian sense, was simply a person with whom Spirit of God dwelt.
Jacob, do you believe we have a soul?
He said he didn't
I,
Said you-
in the notes.
I'm going to say no. I believe consciousness, and I certainly don't understand it even to the level that some scientists, the people that have looked into it, understand it, but I currently just believe it's a collection of chemicals and memories and things like that, and
It's a very scientific
purely
outlook.
like for me the idea that if you have a soul means when your physical body ceases to exist, the soul will live on, and I don't currently believe that.
I'm definitely not religious. I've never been religious, and I was very much growing up like opposed to all of the God and blah blah blah. However, I've always believed in something, that there's a greater power, or there is, whether it's energy. In the last few years, through being exposed to meditation and I guess even some of the principles of, I guess you could call The Secret or Think and Grow Rich, and reflecting, I've come to become more spiritual and believe that there is stuff that's out of our control. Who knows what it is or whatever. And then some, even, through conversations with people and through some experiences, become more open, not to the level of some people, but I guess that's where I currently stand on it. In the last, But I believe I would go down I see spirituality as kind of how you defined it, Trav.
It's
the energy, and energy, and comes to the thing of like, how do you explain intuition and that kind of gut feel, and like things seem to
Consciousness.
naturally happy.
Connection with yourself.
Yeah, like how does, and there's just been so many things. Deja vu is another crazy one as well.
They know what that is, though. They know
do
it's
they?
a delay in the brain. It's sort of like your brain is in a slight delay, like millisecond delay.
Because then
so
there's
it's-
another argument of like, humans are very good at constructing stories, and when you look back, you can always connect the dots. Like, we're so good at being very creative. So like,
Jacob, if something can't be explained by science, how do you justify it to yourself?
Currently, I'm just okay with not knowing. I know that some people, where one methodology to understand the world has its shortcomings, they'll kind of pursue another one to bridge the gaps. At the moment, if I can't understand it and I look into it and say science can't understand it, then I'm just okay with it's just not ready to be understood.
Yeah.
Is spirituality something that you want to go on the journey with, or it's more a topic that you want to discuss and see what other people's feelings were?
A little bit of both. It's kind of, I know from a definition point of view, and just using religion as an example, some people identify as being religious, others atheist, as being like against religion. I find myself very agnostic. I'm sort of indifferent at the moment, in that I don't feel like I need to be spiritual until I know that there's going to be benefit. I feel like once something resonates with me and I'm ready to bring it on board.
It's not as if you've kind of gone down like a nihilistic kind of viewpoint of everything. Nothing means anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's the end of anything. You're actually just happy just to be as you are, like without using a framework to kind of understand it.
As a baptized Catholic, is that because you couldn't explain it all with a scientific approach? Is that why you've, I guess, walked away from it? Because I think, Mike, you made a comment earlier about searching, and people are searching via their religion. I don't think a lot of people that would suggest that they're religious, and I don't want to go, I guess, too deep into religion, but they're not really searching. It's a set of stories and philosophies that they live by, and there's a lot of belief that comes through in in following that religion. It's not that they're there to search for an answer.
It provides a meaning.
The religious context, I think you've accepted the teachings of somebody as whole and complete. I think that's what
Correct.
my challenges with religion are, and I'm a Catholic. I go to church on Sundays. I pray and I do all that stuff. And to be able to get the benefits from anything, you have to accept what it is you're going into in the first place. From a spiritual basis, and that being probably the more buzzword at the moment, particularly with millennials, when you start reading on this stuff online, it's because they don't want to commit to any one secular belief, but they want the benefits of what most religions give you, and that is more confidence and direction towards yourself.
And I'm a prime example of one of those millennials that I don't attach I don't have a very strong attachment to any belief, in that the biggest thing I struggled with when I was learning a lot of like going to church and going to a Catholic school and these was that I wasn't able to suspend my disbelief enough to take on the literal meaning of the messages that.
But belief is important, right? So let's put into context your recent foray into the NFL, American football. Right? If you had no belief,
Josh will love that.
hey, yeah, Josh will love that. I did it before you did it. If you had no desire to participate, then you wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had no belief that it was going to give you some enjoyment or fulfillment or some benefit, you wouldn't buy into it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. There's no real difference to that. But if you're going to read, let's say you're going to read Jocko stuff, okay, because he's a well-known Stoic, and he would say he is.
Yeah.
And it's Stoicism, like the research I've been doing, which is teaching me stuff along the way. Stoicism is not a religion in the traditional sense. However, it is a deeply spiritual way of life designed to transform the practitioner. So if you choose not to have or be indifferent with your attitude towards spirituality, are you then not getting the benefits of the practice?
I think in his own way, he's not defining it as spirituality. He's in himself, he is happy with his framework of morals, values, moving forward, like becoming a better person. So he's kind of created his own framework, which is I think a lot of people are trying to do now, is trying to create their morals, trying to work out where they are, because they don't have the religion hanging over them as they used to. Like, I mean, Nietzsche.
But we're not talking religion. I'm talking spiritual. But if you read Stoicism and you believe to be, indifferent on whether you're spiritual or not, then what benefit are you going to get from that?
So I'm a big picker and chooser of things, and therefore I believe I can read Stoic texts and absorb the content and derive value from it without necessarily doing it in the as a whole. Similar, like I listen to what you say, Travis, about energy and about breath, and I like the language of it. I like the idea of it. I can't quite, in my head, understand it enough yet to really know how I can apply it to me. But meditation is probably not a bad example of something that I know brings value to a lot of people. I know it's very popular and it's a big buzz concept in entrepreneurship at the moment. And I know I'm a very active, energetic person who's just constantly looking for new things to do. And I don't have any sort of mindfulness practice at the moment. And that's something I think I could benefit from. So whether that be mindfulness or meditation, and whether can you meditate without being spiritual, I'm not sure. And
But
that's
have you not been just sort of seeking your community the whole time? I mean, if I go back to the religion piece, you sort of actively didn't believe, so you never made the decision, okay, I'm Catholic, I was put in this Catholic school, right?
Yeah.
So that's a starting point. You then went towards a military focus, and that is in a way looking for a religion. It's like looking for a way of life, a community, a way to be. You've then changed a couple of times, moved into even going back to the American football. A team can be a form of, or an approach, and not a religion, but if you know what I mean. I feel like
framework.
You're still jumping between frameworks of the core thing, which is you're still looking for an answer to what this.
But it doesn't mean you need to call it religion, though, because you're saying that's a religion.
I'm just
that's
saying
a
you
religion.
jump between a few different frameworks.
Frameworks.
Don't get hung up on that terminology, but there's a couple of different. You went to you like the army approach, the military approach, which is why you like Jocko as well. But now you're questioning that a little bit, which I think is all great. It's moving through elements.
He's not questioning it though. He's building his framework around that, which is exactly I think the right way to do it. He's not being influenced and going down a path and just following a single dogmatic kind of setup. He's sort of sees the value in different religion, spirituality, science, and sort of uses things on a real personal level to kind of your own framework.
Yeah. That's 100% right.
Like Jacobite.
I know
religion.
that, like, I look at aspects, and going back to your question before, Travis, I like the idea that we have a soul, that something lives on.
But there hasn't been enough proof for yourself to be I believe
tangible. Well, like my view on that,
because like fate. What about fate or the universe, or like the whole point of the alchemist, which is that if you get out of your own way, the universe will provide. Like are those, like, to me, that's spirit. Like that's energy. Like you're connecting with a higher. There's a
unknown. There's
a higher thing or a higher being. Who knows what that is? And I guess it's like, how do you, like, tapping into subconscious, and you get out of your way, and then coincidences. We talked about coincidences the other day. Like, so is that what you're more taught? Because framework, I think, is like maybe a bit different. Like, you don't believe in any of that, like coincidence.
If we crack the code, maybe we could pull babies out of 3D printers,
or like fate, or.
And I point blank, with all due respect, Jacob, I don't give a fuck if you're spiritual or not, man. I mean, the questions I'm asking you is that I observe your behaviours, and they typically speak to a spiritual behaviour.
And that's fine, though, isn't it?
That's okay. Yeah. So, but I don't care if you want to label yourself a fucking pink elephant. I don't.
But why are you getting angry about it then?
No, because I don't care enough to even try to persuade him, other than observing what he reads, understanding how he practices and go about his life, and he actually does have a very spiritual background. So whether you put a label on it or not is what we're debating on right now.
Yeah, and he hasn't put a label
on
it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think it's a 40-minute episode on whether we put a label on what he does or doesn't do.
Well, and that's why I'm more curious of, like, does everyone in this room believe in those things? Like, because I think that's a big question for a lot of people around the spiritual side of things. Like that stuff we just talked about, sure. But, the secret, the universe, the logos, like, is it something worth being open-minded to, or can you just live through going, you know what, if it can't be whatever? Like, what value can you get from these things?
If you go to the zoo and see a 2-ton grey thing walking around with something that looks like a very long nose and a very short tail, and someone's got a sign on it that says cheetah, what are you going to do?
You call it a cheetah.
Would you?
I would contact the signage guys. They got that. They got that wrong.
My point exactly. I observed this guy with spiritual practice and behaviour.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, whether you want to say you do it or don't, I call bullshit.
Well, it's not bullshit. It's just him.
It's bullshit. It's the wrong sign.
But what exactly is bullshit? Exactly.
Him saying that he's not spiritual.
He's lacking belief.
But that's just his definition of it.
No, but I just asked you, if you saw the cheetah sign on a fucking elephant,
belief
what would you
of seeing it actually.
Call the fucking signage person.
Yeah. What does that mean, though?
You can't reinforce the hypothesis that it's there because you can't connect experiences.
It's up to you to decide.
Yeah. Exactly. It doesn't need to call it.
Believe in it.
But
go with it.
You come back to it's connection with yourself.
But isn't that what spirituality is?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what spirituality is. And you doing, reading what you're doing and doing what you're doing is connecting with yourself. So that, in turn, technically is spirituality.
Yeah.
Instagram perusing. If you look up hashtag spirituality,
there's just photos of you, Moff.
And I'm, and that's almost part of this. I wanted to see potentially what aspects of what I'm doing is how broad a definition of spirituality is there. What things am I doing that I could go, okay, actually, maybe I was doing things all along. If you look at an elephant that you've labelled a cheetah, my issue with that is the fact that if you label an elephant, it's now an elephant. Whereas I like the idea.
The elephant wouldn't care what you call it.
I like the idea of it just having no label and being able to do whatever the fuck.
So you don't have a spirit animal.
What's the connotation with spirituality? Yeah, I think being a little bit airy-fairy as well, especially with 6 males sitting in a room, that people don't want to be put into that box as well of being spiritual.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think we're all splitting hairs over this stuff because when you start reading the verbiage around spirituality and the millennials, it's actually quite interesting. It's almost laughable because it's like they want to belong to a group, but they don't want to label themselves.
Yeah.
But haven't we done that through generations regardless? Has every generation not challenged some part of that?
Yeah. But I think with like the breakdown of Christianity and religion over the last sort of 150 years, 200 years, with the rise of materialism, science, people are now searching for something, trying to label.
There's been some great stuff that that Justin and I have talked about over the last few weeks, or probably over the last week, that talks about the necessary need of the myth in the usage of
I
the
watched
growth
that video
society.
last night.
So I think if for no other reason we believe that a journey like a hero's journey through Joseph Campbell's structure is needed, then why not believe in a God? I talked about this in our office the other day, that it probably wasn't until my dad passed away, and I believe in spirit, and I had that conversation with myself, okay, well, fuck, if my dad could see everything I do, what is it that I want him to see?
Yeah, so you're using it as a framework to make yourself a better person.
But again, is that not what religion is?
Yeah, definitely. Yep. But
Or
there's a lack
spiritual-
of it. There's a breakdown of it, I
think
suppose.
the breakdown is the observance of the reflection within yourself. Because I could go to church on a Sunday and still hear people, yelling at each other coming out of the car park.
And this is what I love about what Jacob's doing. He's building his own moral framework, not using something.
So he's not using religion, but he has spiritual behaviours. He's not using a religious framework. Which
Well, he has
I
his behaviours.
I can understand a non-religious practitioner. I don't say go to church or go to a temple, or I'm not saying that. I'm saying your behaviours are deeply spiritual. If you look at the context of how, and I would consider you a Stoic practitioner. I would consider you that based on the conversations we have had, based on the observations I see. So by definition, you're attaching to a spiritual way of life.
Well, is really... I'm not sure. I'm not a big religious person, so I don't know the...
Oh, I've got a question for you then.
Well, sorry. I've never... Sorry. I'll rephrase that. I've never been exposed to religion in my life. Right? So is religion, when you practice it,
It's the construct. It's a structure.
Is it connect... But the structure to connect with yourself? Is that...
I think so, the religion to me, and being a practicing Catholic for 47 years, the structure of the Catholic Church does not appeal to me. Okay, and I've gone to the Vatican, I've put myself into literature, I've read copious amounts of literature on it. Okay, what I do like is the written word from the various people that have contributed to the various books, and allow myself to go through the writings and what that teaches me.
So you like the stories and the myths?
I love the stories, yeah. Love the
Because
stories.
it allows you to learn from their mistakes.
And so for those, and I'm only making an observation, for those people that don't go through the process, how do you filter out what you want?
I mean, I think being in the Western world, living in Australia, Anglo sort of culture, saying that you've never had any connection with religion or experience of it is everything is built around us has come from a religious framework over the last 2,000
our
years.
legal
Everything.
system, our legal system is cornerstone.
Even
of religion.
science itself has come from that knowing.
I read some literature the other day that 70 of the world's top scientists are actually employed in Vatican City.
working on a
the
secret
Catholic Church.
project.
Isn't that a friggin' play?
holy water.
I've got the article and I'll share it with you guys. So I mean, it's what is the differentiator? I mean, I think when you're looking at spirituality, it's a practice thing, not a belief thing.
But it's the breakdown of that system that we're challenged with now. Like, how do we, like what Jacob's doing, morally build your framework and values? Because I mean, subconsciously and consciously, you've been built around the Christian values and myths of.
Well, let's break it down then. So we've gone through and figured out what spirituality is in different terms. If someone's on the same journey, what actionable items can we give to them to start them on the journey to find their spirituality, whether if it is religion, whether if it's energy, whether if it's stoicism, whether if it's science. Is there anything that you would like to?
I think questioning, like looking, reading, like you do, Conrad. Like, I mean, taking in knowledge and not being sucked in or going down a path that you then sort of are single-minded in your approach to it. So being very open with knowledge and trying to learn about as much as you can.
I think
Science.
putting yourself amongst and around people too. I mean, Nat Burton, who we've had on this show a while back, she went through over the last 12 months investigating her spirituality and her religious tendencies, and she actually went and joined a church and became part of that and figured out what she liked and what she didn't like, and it was interesting having those conversations with her and what she was feeling as where she was losing control or losing power because the structure itself made her feel a certain way, and so there were great conversations to have with her. So anybody that's, I believe, struggling with whether they have a spiritual bias or not, firstly, I mean, if you're asking yourself the question, it's a great point to start from. Then the opportunity then becomes, who else are you able to talk to?
That's a great point, is questioning, just not being set in a framework, like close-minded. Yeah, and I think it's an easy place to be. Yeah, is to not question it.
I almost feel like, only because of my experience and talked about it a lot today, I almost feel like Stoicism is a little bit of an entry, like a small step, because some aspects.
It's a big step.
It's a big step. It's not a small step.
I don't know. I feel like because it's something I connected a lot with, and I'm not very religious and everything.
Because it doesn't have a label.
So
that's why it's
go
so
and
easy to sell.
go and pick up the book. Just go and pick up the book and go and read.
The Bible.
But it's very practical.
Yeah.
One thing with Stoicism is the practicality of it.
Maybe that's it. That's why I see it as almost like a gateway.
Yeah. So as a father, right? I got baptized.
I'm glad you said as a father, not as a mother, because then we would have really had problems.
That would be I would be the second person in history after Arnold Schwarzenegger to deliver a baby.
As a parent,
as a parent, and as one who, obviously my wife Tash was raised Catholic. I was not, although I had a couple of experiences where I attended a couple of events and things. But I made the choice to get baptized in the church, and I did that because what my kids are learning as well in this process and the stories. It's about stories. I can't give them access to all these stories, living the life that we live. Like, so there's so many things that are happening or that can happen in these stories, and that's all they are, to help them form what the idea of being a good person is and what what kind of habits they should live through it. These are things that can come through these stories that you're not. And let's face it, things like, for example, ABC Kids, there's a lot of great themes and things that come through in some of these TV shows and other things too, but what they're learning from is stories, and you can't give them the full experience necessarily in just what you do in your daily life.
You're morally programmed by the age of 8 anyway, so the challenges are fine, but the moral code that you're built on is done very early in your life.
Well, my kids are under 8, so they're learning a lot. And,
Yeah.
and at the moment, some of the exposure to some of the stories...
The Wizenard stories.
Hey,
Oh, I can't wait to get that book.
It's awesome. I've been listening to
That's
Kobe
Kobe's,
Bryant's
yeah.
Kobe
new
Bryant's,
series.
like, which is similar of like, which
Harry
he
Potter.
is Harry Potter, which is, he said the exact same thing. Is like, I can't tell my kids you need to work hard and this and that. They don't fucking listen. So he's like, I'll create a whole bunch of stories that tell the exact same things. What was interesting is then going watch a few movies of like Marvel or Disney, and you're like, whoa, there's
Right through it, man.
all of it.
So the stories are no different. It's just it's a different
The
frame.
vehicle and framing, yeah.
It's just, you're right, vehicle and framing. So if you roll right back to the core of spirituality, it doesn't, like, the framework doesn't really matter. I think maybe the question you're asking yourself is more a belief piece, and whether you're accepting that you are or not. And my only thought to the few of you in the room that have sort of pushed back around around religion is, like it or not. I mean, like, I've got a copy of the Quran on the shelf. That's not
One of the best books you'll ever read, I reckon.
But I have that in my study. But the point is, go and have a look and just read a couple of paragraphs and different things, and you can choose to take the meaning you want from it. But that's like we're fragmenting, Mike, as you talked about, because there's lots of different spin-offs of religions and things now. But there always would have been that in a different frame. Like the local, but they were just using the same book. Like some local pastor in a small town somewhere would have still been taking his slant on it, and they still do now to this day. It's just that it's fragmenting a little more with these millennials, and they will find a challenge, or will find a challenge as a society.
These
because
millennials.
I'm a millennial.
Three of
but-
them in the room.
Yeah,
Are you a millennial?
Just borderline.
I thought you were weird.
Yeah, I am.
And there's a great point in that, Matt, is that
Ancient millennial.
that's
You'd be an ancient
He's the
millennial.
oldest millennial I've ever seen.
Squeaks in by 2.5 months.
It's been by a couple of years, actually, depending on your framework. But yeah,
and that's kind of what I do currently already. Like, to say that I went through 17 years of being raised Catholic, going to a Catholic school, and got nothing from it and fully rejected it
Mate, your moral code
would
is
be
all Catholic, mate.
would be a crazy statement. I took a lot of that. The stories and the message and the morals is a huge part of what I took. I just looked at the entire package and went, here are the bits that resonate with me. Here are the stories, the morals.
So, sorry
Isn't
to
it
cut you
right?
off. Can I ask about Henry, your son?
Yes.
And so now, how do you feel you're infusing stories, morals, behaviours into him? Do you think you can use or create all that yourself through your actions completely? Or do you think at some point you'll need to bring in some additional stories and other things for that experience, like what you had? So even if you are 100% rejecting Catholicism at the time, that's fine. But you've said you've dragged out some key pieces of the stories. How do you now see his upbringing, and what will you do similar or different?
Well, at the moment, he gets his like Ainsley, my wife and Henry's mother is Christian, and her family is as well. So he'll get a lot of exposure to it via them, and he'll then get my perspective and theirs, and like, hopefully, like me, he'll just be able to pick and choose the bits that resonate with him. And also, there's a 99% chance I'll be sending him to Trinity, a Catholic school where I went, knowing that
That's what I was looking for.
now we're done.
because
Great episode. Thanks, guys.
Should ask at the start. What are you sending Henry?
because I trust he'll be able to pick and choose the bits and pieces he likes too.
Keep him open-minded. That's the key.
Because they do that at Trinity.
You probably have to this day and age.
Just out of curiosity, like going quickly around the room more of coming back to like we started with the science piece. Does everyone believe there is a higher power or a higher sense of something, or we are literally just atoms and it is what it is?
I'm a bit like that. Is what it is. We are atoms. There is something we don't know, which is the big existential crisis, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't believe there's a God, but I just believe there's a universal energy.
There's definitely, however you want to put it, there's something higher than that. Whether you want to label it as a god or not, depends on however you want to label it. But it's for me, it's there. I can't actually put agree or well, consciousness to me has to be to an extent, and that's my view on it.
When you say higher, do you mean so you're putting something as in better or higher or away from you, or just something you don't know?
No, it's completely surrounding and within all of us. In my view, it's 100% connected, and it's just what I'm saying is higher than our complete comprehension via science.
I do, purely because I know there's everything that's currently understood, and I understand there's infinite amounts beyond that can't be explained, and therefore there's a lot of things to us now that appear to be a higher power or coincidence or energy and all these other things that once upon a time we would have looked at the things we understand now and go, fire, for example, was never understood and was this mystical thing that people but now we know that it's the burning of carbon and all the things that go into
even
it.
mental, like autism and stuff like that. So a couple of hundred years ago, there was an evil spirit in that person, like mental sort of issues. There was, so people didn't understand that. Well, now we understand the brain function and what's going on. So there is progress from a scientific point of view to actually say, okay, we don't believe now that person has got an evil spirit in them. So things like that as well.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. I believe there is more to the world than we currently understand.
Yeah, I'm good with God.
That was coming.
Well, I don't know whether he's good with me.
You're just hedging your bets there.
Well, here's the funny thing, right? Because I read a personal development book many years ago, and the only time you'll be able to ever prove or disprove that theory is when you can't change your mind.
Yeah.
It's when you're dead. So I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm going to believe in God. I'm going to act that way. And if he's not there, then so be it.
There's a theory with that, actually. You may as well believe there's a God, because in the end it doesn't really matter
Doesn't
either way.
matter.
It's going to probably be good for you if you
But
did believe. If
that's
not,
actually the core of this entire episode, is that belief. And so as do I. And for a big time in my life, I sort of sat where you've sat, looking for an answer. And then I made the decision, and I chose to believe. And you can, as I said, there's different gods, different people in the world have different approaches to how and who. And
I call mine Bruce Wayne.
yeah, yours is Bruce Wayne, not Bruce Willis.
mine is Bruce Willis.
You're a spirit animal.
I think it's sad if you don't, and I think it's because I just think it's you can't get out of your own way, your own ego to work out, or to just have some belief in that there is something more.
But you're saying that Jacob doesn't have belief. He does.
I think he hasn't made the decision to trust his instinct.
And on that, there'll be some reflection.
You do the wind-up thingy.
Yeah. So,
Coffee's
Trinity,
coming.
you're getting a application form.
yeah, well, oh boy, easy.
Straight it.
So on that, I'm going to conclude this podcast.
Are you
Hopefully,
spiritual,
this has
bro?
inspired you guys to have a chat with friends, like especially as a group of males, us getting together.
run
and talking
straight
about-
into the pub and say, boys, who's spiritual?
Yeah, they're things that as men we don't often talk about and should be talked about. It's not a taboo subject, and therefore it's something that we should get to know people at a deeper level that way. So have these conversations, comment and share out your sort of feelings. Do you identify as spiritual or not, or are you on a bit of a kind of on the fence, a bit like I am? And like, share, love our comments, our content, and until next time, thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Jabba.